Hey everyone! So today we're going to start off talking about something that is often misunderstood, which is resolution. So let's jump into it. Now, let me give you a warning real quick. When I record these videos, I'm at home and my dog is sometimes a little antsy. She walks around. She needs her nails clipped, so you might hear some tapping. Just try to ignore that part. Anyways, let's get into it. So, resolution refers to how many pixels are in your image. And I'm going to show you some examples of all of this in just a moment. Let me just get this information out to you. A pixel is a square of color, a solid square of color. And all of these pixels together is what makes up digital images and digital photos. The more pixels you have, the smoother the transitions are between colors. And if you crop your image, you're losing pixels also. So this is why images, especially like smartphone photos, start looking worse when you start cropping them. There's less pixels, so there's less nice transitions of colors and such. So, some very general guidelines for resolution. For printing, you usually want around 240 to 300 pixels per inch. That means that in 1 inch of your document, there's going to be 240 to 300 little squares of color. That's for printing. Any higher doesn't really have a noticeable difference. So an example here is if you have a 4-inch by 6-inch print, you'd want your image to have 1200 to 1800 pixels. Why? So 400 or 4 inches times 300 pixels, that's 1200 pixels. That's to get a really nice photo. If you have less than that amount of pixels on the 4-inch side and you try to print it, it's not going to look that great. Now, some online printing services recommend as low as 150 pixels. That usually has to do with textured materials like canvas prints, there's all kinds of different factors that go into it, the different types of printing, how it's being printed, the different types of ink. So in your future careers, if you're working with a printer, you want to talk to them directly. If it's like an online type of printing service where you're uploading images, there's usually an FAQ or frequently asked questions section on their page that will give information such as pixels, such as color space, which we'll get into later on in the semester. And you want to follow the guidelines for your printer. Now, for online, you generally want 72 to 96 pixels per inch. When we're looking on stuff on screens, we don't need as much resolution. So personally, I go with 100 a lot of times just because it's easier to do the math in my head. Now, the size does depend on the screen the image is being viewed on. And that's why you might have a really cool photo or graphic on your phone. It looks great, but then you open it up on a computer and you can start seeing that it's pixelated. You can start seeing all of those little squares of color. That's because of the screen that you're viewing it on. Nothing's changed about the image. It's just that if you have a small screen, smaller images and such with smaller resolution with less pixels is going to look just fine. Okay, so some other general guidelines for websites. It kind of depends on what part of the website a graphic or an image is going on. I usually say between 500 and 2,000 pixels. If you're working on websites for people, whatever the host can help you. If it's like a drag and drop type of website, what is the resolution that's going to look good for a certain part? For example, a header that goes across the whole top of an image of a website, is going to need to have more resolution than a small ad that's just in a corner. Okay. All right, so let's look at Photoshop real quick and let me show you what happens when you change the resolution on the same image. So let's go over here. And while we're here, let's just do a quick tour of Photoshop for those of you who maybe haven't actually been in it or it's been a while. So here is your general Photoshop document pane. Over here we have all of the different tools. There's actually way more tools that can be found So on this last tool, if I click and hold down, we get a list of all these different extra tools, and you can actually edit the toolbar and customize it. So if you find you're using the same type of tools over and over again, you can actually add them to your toolbar. Right up here is, Photoshop. Okay. Right up here is the options for the tool you are using. So whatever tool you pick, so let me click here. All right. So that's our move tool. These are the options we have for the move tool. You'll see that it changes when I change to different tools. So that's a really nice to know, especially if something's not quite working right. Looking up here and seeing, did you use this tool and changed a setting at some point and forgot to change it back or whatever. This can really be helpful when something's not quite working how you think it should be working. Right over here is where your panels live. Right now I have my layers panel up. And there are even more panels right up here. So this one deals with like text, if you need to change up your text a bit. There's adjustment layers, so changing parts of an image or the whole image. And there's a whole lot of panels in Photoshop. If you go up here to window, you can see that these are all the different panels that are available. So if there's a panel that's not over here that you want to open up, you can come to the window, menu item, and then scroll and then click on whatever you want. So if I wanted to work with some gradients, I can click there, and now it's here. You see the icon has been added right over here. If I click these double things right there, it'll move in. We're going to be going into all of this in a lot more detail. This is just an introduction just to kind of help you see what's going on. Okay, guys, so don't freak out on me. Now, one of the great things about Photoshop to this day, there are so many awesome apps out there. I love using different design and photo apps on my phone and such, but with Photoshop, there is so much control that you have. And part of the reason is because we have layers, and layers work like they're building on top of each other. So if we look over here at my layers panel, we have all kinds of stuff going on. At the very bottom is my background. So when I say, like, for instance, this area right here, we have the text on top of a gradient going on. Let's see, where's that part? Purchase info levels. Okay, so here is my shape, which is creating this really nice line here. And then on top of that, I have my gradient that's going on top of here. And then on top of that, I've got this text. So if I turn off this layer with this little eyeball, you could see that the text, that's the layer that text is on. And if I moved this, let's say I moved it down here, now it's underneath that layer, and that's why we cannot see it anymore. So let me hit Command Z, or if you're on a Windows machine, it's Control, Command Z, and it's put it back up there on the layers, and now we can see it because it's on top of this shape and gradient that is creating this shape up here. So that's kind of the basics of layers. You can just think of them as stacking on top of each other. So if you have a layer and you're like, why can't I see it? It might be that it is buried down in your layers list, and so it's being hidden by something else. Another reason it could be is because this little eyeball's been popped off. The little eyeball lets you, it's basically saying I can see it or I can't. Okay. All right. Yeah, so that's a quick intro to Photoshop. Now let's get back into this resolution business. So this is my original file that, I created this for the Allied Staff and Faculty Association here on campus. And if we look right up down here, we have this information about the size. It says 8.5 inches by 11 inches at 300 ppi. So I knew that that they possibly wanted to print these out as flyers. So I created the document at 8.5 by 11 inches. And with the 300 ppi, that's for printing, 300 pixels per inch. So let's zoom in and look at some pixels real quick. Zoom, zoom, zoom. Okay, so you can see that we have these little squares of color. So there isn't anywhere a smooth gradient. Let's actually go, let me zoom back out. Let's look up here. So even here where it appears to be a smooth gradient, it's because there's these little pixels of color are slowly, there's all kinds of colors in between that are shifting and creating what appears to be a smooth gradient. Right, like you could see here. This is just, you know, this shadow is not a black shadow, it's just a slightly darker green basically. That's getting lighter and lighter and lighter, and it's creating the appearance of a shadow. So these are the pixels. All right, and I'm actually going to hit Command 0, and that'll bring, Controller Command 0, and that'll bring it right to the full size. Now, speaking of Control and Command 0s, when sometimes in my videos I forget to say it. So if I say Command, it's because I'm working on a Mac, and that's what I'm used to. If I say command something, if you're on a Windows machine, use Control, okay? I'm sorry, I try, but I forget sometimes. So Command and Control, those are interchangeable between the two. All right, so anyways, let's look at, so let me bring this up. I saved the same document, this PSD, which is a Photoshop document, as a JPEG. And I'm going to change this. Right now it's at the same resolution, but I'm going to go ahead and change it to 200 pixels per inch. We're not going to see a huge difference, but if we actually printed these out and we're looking at them side by side, we would start seeing a difference with what's going on here. So I'm going to come up here to image size, and here we have some options. So right now we can see the full dimensions. This document is 2,550 pixels wide by 3,300 pixels tall. And you can see that here we have width and we have the height. Here's the resolution, 300 pixels per inch. So if I change this to 200, you can see that it's kept at this, it's going to keep it the same size, 8.5 by 11, but it's actually taking out pixels, and now there's less pixels actually going on here. So let's go ahead and hit OK. And you can see that it got smaller on here. Now I can go ahead and hit Command or Control 0, and if we switch back and forth, we're really not seeing that big of a difference. Now, one of the reasons this is because we're looking at a screen that doesn't need a lot of resolution. Like I said, if we printed these side by side, we would be able to see more of a difference. All right, so here's another one. Let's go ahead and change this. Image size, 100 pixels per inch. Okay, and now you can see how much smaller it's gotten, Command 0. And okay, it's starting to look a little fuzzier. But again, that 100 pixels per inch is fine for online, so it's going to be hard to tell without actually printing these out. All right, so let's do this one at 50. All right, and now we are starting to see more of a noticeable difference because 50 is under what we need for a screen resolution. So now we are starting to see that it's starting to look, you know, pixelated. It has that blurry look. We're not getting those nice gradients anymore. Let's go up to this rainbow area and take a look. All right, and you can see before I had to zoom in quite a bit for us to see the different pixels, and I'm not having to zoom in nearly as much because there's less pixels per inch. So let's get in over here now. Now another way, so I'm going to go ahead, and this one I'm going to switch to 2,000 pixels. Let's go to image size. Now this time I'm actually going to change it from up here. I'm not going to change the resolution, so it's still going to have the same pixels per inch, but I'm going to change it up here just to show you guys that it kind of works the same way. Now when you're printing, you're going to want to be paying attention more to the resolution per inch in regards to the entire size of the document. When we're doing online type of graphics, it's more about the total amount of pixels. Per inch doesn't really matter anymore. So let's go ahead and do, I'm just going to work on the long side, which is the height. So let's go 2,000. Okay. And I'm going to do this going smaller and smaller and smaller so then we can look at them all. All right, let's see. So let's go. We go a little fast on this. Okay. 500. What's this one? 200. And 50. Oops, wrong one. Okay, tiny. All right, so let's go back. Here's our 2000. And let's go here, hit Command 0, so we're full screen. Okay. Okay. So that's 50 total pixels across, or high, I should say. That I was doing the height. So that's 50 pixels high. That's what this would look like. All right, so we're not seeing any details anymore. That's at 100 pixels high or let me see, 200, 500, 1000, 2000. Okay, so again, we can see the different changes going on. And so when things are getting pixelated, that means that there's not enough resolution for either the screen or the printer for it to have. Okay, so I hope this helps you understand resolution a little bit more. We're going to be working with this more throughout the semester. And just remember that you need a higher pixel count when you're printing to get those nice smooth transitions. Stuff for online doesn't need as many pixels.